She needs some chamomile.
She needs some chamomile. One of the things that we've been trying to do this year is grow more of our own medicinal herbs, and this is one of my favorites. I used to call it Calendula because I liked the name, but it's actually pronounced Calendula, or most people pronounce it Calendula. So this yellow flower right here, and this particular one is called Calendula Resina, which has some of the stronger medicinal properties in it. It's really good for the skin, so I like to use it in like salves or balms for the skin, or lotions. I believe it's also good for healing the skin. So if you have, some people make boo-boo balm for little kids or for yourself even. You can use it for bug bites and things like that as well. So how to harvest this, just learned this from my friend Missy. Thanks, Missy, for this tip. As with most flowers, if you cut it back to the next leaf, another flower will grow up out of that. You can kind of see how it's already doing that here. So calendula is a flower that likes to be cut often and harvested often. You can also see here that there's already a spent seed head forming. We're gonna just cut this off, and I'm actually gonna cut it right back to that other. But you can start to see the seeds forming in here. There are these funky little curly seeds, and if I let it dry on there, they'll get brown, which I will do at the end of the season so we can collect the seeds for next year. But at this point, I don't want it to seed because I want it to create more flowers so that we have more flowers to put in an olive oil base, which I'll show you on another video. For right now, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna cut these spent seeds off, just throw them on the ground so there's more organic material helping the plant and building our soil. And for the other calendula heads, they usually open and close at nighttime. And here we've got Peaches. So the calendula flowers themselves will open about mid-morning, and that's when you want to harvest them, or in the middle of the afternoon like we have here. I want them open like so. I want all the petals to be off of that middle point. So sometimes they are a little more closed. I don't see any that are more closed here, but we'll show you that in on another plant. And I'm gonna cut it right back. Can you see that? I'm gonna cut it. Oh, hello, bumblebee. Hello, friend.
Thank
I'm
you.
making a lot of bumblebee friends this year. So I'm gonna cut it right back. I can probably cut it back to that small one, but I kind of like to cut it back to the larger. And I'll have my head like that. I'm going to cut the stem off. I'll just leave it on the ground. And then when I dry it, I'm gonna dry it face down like this. Sometimes we use baking pans. It's better to use something, or more preferred to use something like we're using a window screen so that it gets some airflow underneath as well. And there's no chance of mold or anything like that. And I'm going to harvest actually most of these here. It's a very forgiving plant. So if you cut off something that you're not sure, or you cut off one that is maybe a little too small, like, more will grow back, and the more that you cut, the more that they grow back. So let's go to the next plant. So this is called Zeolights Calendula. just a different kind of calendula. Some have more of the medicinal properties than others. Every calendula still has medicinal properties. The yellow one that we talked about before, the Calendula Resina, has more of that resin. And this is what that zeolite looks like. So there are some heads on this one that aren't fully open yet in the middle. Those are like, I'm gonna cut them off just to show you. You can see the difference between these two here. So this one I wouldn't typically cut off until it's open completely like that and I can see the center, but I'll dry it anyway and stick it in our olive oil bath that we will be doing. There were also a few, let me see if I can reach them, I threw them down here already. There were also a few that were already going to seed heads. And this is only because I haven't cut in a little while. I just cut those off to threw them on the ground. If they grow seeds, they grow seeds. I don't think the seeds are developed enough, but I could be wrong. But I just kind of threw them on the ground so that the plant keeps producing all of the wonderful calendula heads. And sometimes the plant looks pretty bare at the end of this, and by tomorrow I guarantee there will be more blossoms. So this wonderful, very potent plant is chamomile. It has a very strong smell, especially on the plant itself. If you've had chamomile tea before, you know that even the dried tea can have a very strong smell to it. So this is another plant that the more that you harvest, the better, and the more that it will grow. I try to harvest this plant as much as possible. This is actually way more flowers than I usually leave on the plant, but because we've been gone for a few days, this is just what has grown on here. Same kind of deal as the calendula. They have these little leaves here that you can cut down to, so you can cut the stem like this, cut it down to the next leaf, and then you can just cut the top off. If you don't do that, I know Kevin from Epic Gardening has a little boop that he does every time he cuts it. A lot of the time I've just been cutting the flower heads off of the plant, and you can just leave the stems. It'll keep growing. The tip that I would give you also when you're cutting these off, because they can kind of jump a little bit, I like to put them between my fingers and cut between my hand and the flower, because sometimes it'll jump off the flower and then into the grass below, never to be found again. So I like to just cut it off like that most of the time, or kind of position my hand underneath. And it seems like my clippers are a little, see, there it goes.
God.
Found it. But it's a little bit easier, and you can smell them after you cut them. They're very, very potent. Chamomile, it's a pretty common known flower herb, but it is one that is so wonderful for sleepy time tea, for calming properties. That's what we mostly use it for here. So this is a chamomile plant that we planted earlier this year. The one that you saw in the previous clip, I think I planted those seeds last year, and they didn't come up at the time, and they decided to come up this year. So that seemed to have happened in a couple different cases around our homestead and our garden beds. And the more that I've clipped off of that plant kind of started like this one, where it was like a little scraggly, a little tall, and less bushy. This one just started blooming. So you see we only have a few heads on here. And that's exactly what happened with the other one. So what I'll do is, if I keep cutting these flower heads, what happened on that other plant is that I went from 1 or 2 flower heads, and now you saw how much was on that other plant. I don't even think I harvested all of them, and we've got a basket full of goodness here. But this is what it looks like in the beginning, and then you can see all of these little rounded leaves that are kind of tucked in here, ready to unfurl, and these little heads, and as we cut it, it will bush and create even more abundance for us. Thanks so much for walking with us around the garden today and learning about calendula and chamomile. Please subscribe and stay tuned for more videos coming every Wednesday. Sending you some big love.